Hello guys, welcome back to TFD. So today we're talking about Team USA's matchup against New Zealand. And yes, the result was exactly what most people expected. Team USA absolutely dominated and ended up winning the game by 55 points. Now on paper, that sounds like complete destruction, and in many ways it was. But the game itself actually had a lot of interesting moments, a lot of experimenting, and some very clear takeaways about how this team is functioning right now. Coming into this game, Team USA was on the second night of a back-to-back. Meanwhile, New Zealand had already lost 3 straight games in the tournament. So realistically, the talent gap here was massive. If we're being honest, most people expected Team USA to win by something crazy like 60, 70, maybe even more. Personally, I thought it could easily be a 70-point blowout. So when the final margin ended up being 55, it almost felt strange to say the performance wasn't perfect, even though that's still a huge win. The game itself was kind of weird because it felt like 2 completely different halves. Team USA had moments where they looked unstoppable, and then other stretches where the offense looked messy and disorganized. The start of the game wasn't particularly smooth. Then the second quarter looked strong. The third quarter again felt sloppy, and then the fourth quarter was excellent. That inconsistency really showed that the coaching staff was clearly experimenting with lineups. They were trying different combinations, moving players around, and testing things that might matter later in the tournament. Coming into this game, one of the most interesting parts was how Caitlin Clark was used. For most of the game, she wasn't actually playing her natural position. Instead, she was being placed off the ball at small forward, while other players handled the point guard duties. And honestly, it just didn't look comfortable. When Clark was playing small forward, the impact simply wasn't there. She struggled to get into rhythm, struggled to get shots going, and overall just didn't look like herself. Through the first 3 quarters, she had some rough stretches, and it was pretty clear that putting her in that off-ball role takes away the biggest strength she has. Because the truth is simple, Caitlin Clark is at her best when she's running the offense. Then came the fourth quarter, and things completely changed. Clark finally started handling the ball more at point guard, and instantly the offense looked more fluid. In about 6 minutes of action during the fourth quarter, she produced 5 points and 4 assists with 0 turnovers, which is extremely efficient for such a short stretch. That small sample was enough to remind everyone why she's such a special playmaker. When she's at point guard, she's constantly creating opportunities, finding cutters, hitting shooters, and pushing the pace. Even when she isn't scoring, she's generating open looks. She also had several hockey assists, meaning she made the pass that led to the assist. Those kinds of plays don't always show up in the box score, but they're incredibly valuable for offensive flow. Now, to be fair, Caitlin Clark didn't shoot particularly well from 3 in this game. She finished 2 of 7 from deep, and many of those attempts were open shots that she normally makes. So that's definitely something she'll want to clean up. But inside the arc, she was perfect. She went 4 for 4 on 2-point shots, and she hasn't missed a shot inside the 3-point line during the stretch of games. That's actually a really impressive stat and shows how efficient she's been when attacking closer to the basket. On the other side of things, Angel Reese had a really strong first half. In fact, you could easily argue that Reese was the best player for Team USA in the first half. She brought energy, rebounding, and defensive intensity, which helped set the tone early in the game. Another standout performer was Rhyne Howard, who ended up being the player of the game for many people watching. Howard looked confident offensively and knocked down shots consistently. When she gets into that rhythm, she becomes extremely difficult to stop. We've seen that before in her professional career as well. When Rhyne Howard gets hot, there's really not much defenses can do. She has the ability to score in bunches and completely swing the momentum of a game. Other players also contributed solid minutes. Kelsey Plum continued to provide offensive production, which she's done in every game so far. Jackie Young looked sharp during the minutes she played, and players like Monique Billings and Kiki Iriathan had moments where they were finishing plays created by their teammates. Monique Billings particularly has been a really nice fit in some of these lineups. She moves well, finishes around the basket, and benefits a lot from the playmaking of players like Clark. Defensively, Team USA was mostly strong throughout the game. They forced mistakes, created turnovers, and kept New Zealand from finding any consistent rhythm. Even though New Zealand had a few stretches where they knocked down shots, they were never really in a position to compete. At the end of the day, though, this game was always going to be about managing rotations and trying different strategies. When you're facing a team with a much lower talent level, it becomes an opportunity to test lineups rather than just chase the biggest possible margin. Still, the biggest takeaway from the game feels pretty obvious. Caitlin Clark at point guard looks like one of the most dangerous players on the floor. Caitlin Clark at small forward simply doesn't look nearly as effective. Maybe some days she could develop into a more versatile off-ball player, but right now, her greatest strength is controlling the game with the ball in her hands. When she's orchestrating the offense, everything flows better. Overall, Team USA still won comfortably, even if the performance wasn't perfect. They weren't as dominant as they looked against Italy, but they were definitely better than the performance earlier in the tournament against Puerto Rico. So a 55-point win is still a huge result, and the team continues to build momentum. The biggest question going forward will be how the coaching staff decides to use their lineups, especially when it comes to putting their best playmakers in positions where they can make the biggest impact. Because if the fourth quarter showed us anything, it's that when Caitlin Clark is running the offense, Team USA becomes a very different team. So today, we're going to take a look at the Team USA's stats so far in the tournament. Because honestly, when you start going through the numbers, there's one thing that becomes very clear. In a lot of the major statistical categories, one name keeps popping up over and over again, and that name is Caitlin Clark. And this is actually one of the funniest things about the current stat sheet. If you look at the major categories for Team USA, points, assists, efficiency, rebounds, steals, blocks, you'll notice that Clark is technically leading 3 of the biggest ones right now. She's leading the team in efficiency, points per game, and assists per game. Now, before we even go deeper into that, we have to talk about the efficiency stat for a second, because this is something that keeps showing up everywhere. It's called FIBA efficiency, and you see it listed on almost every international box score. But here's the funny part. A lot of people quoting it don't actually know what it means. You see analysts posting graphics saying, these are the leaders in efficiency, and fans start debating it online. But if you ask most people to actually explain how the number is calculated, they honestly can't. It's not PER, it's not exactly advanced analytics like NBA metrics, it's just a formula that adds up positive stats and subtracts negatives. So when you see Clark leading in efficiency, it sounds impressive, and it probably is, but at the same time, it's one of those stats that many people reference without really understanding how it works. Still, if the stat sheet says someone is leading, then it's worth mentioning. And right now, Clark sits at the top of that category for Team USA. Beyond that, the more traditional numbers are actually even more interesting. Clark is currently leading the team in points per game, averaging 12.8 points per game, which puts her about 3 points ahead of Rhyne Howard, who sits second. She's also leading the team in assists per game, continuing to show why she's considered one of the most dynamic playmakers in the game right now. Right behind her in assists is Chelsea Gray, who is about an assist and a half behind per game. When it comes to rebounding, that category belongs to Angel Reese, which shouldn't surprise anyone who has been watching her career. In fact, when you start comparing rebounders across the women's game, there really aren't many players who consistently match Reese's production on the boards. You might mention someone like Jessica Shepard as a strong rebounder on a per-minute basis, but even then, Reese still stands out as one of the best in that department. Looking at the other stat leaders, Monique Billings is currently leading Team USA in blocks per game, averaging 2 per game. On the defensive side, in terms of steals, Paige Bueckers is leading the team with 2.3 steals per game, showing her defensive instincts as well as her offensive skill. So when you break it down, there are 6 main statistical categories people usually focus on, and Clark is leading half of them, while other players are stepping up in the remaining ones. Now, the big question becomes, who has actually been the best player for Team USA so far? If you ask most people watching closely, there are probably 3 names that stand out above the rest. Those names are Caitlin Clark, Rhyne Howard, and Paige Bueckers. Those 3 players have arguably been the most impactful overall during the tournament. There are other players who have been solid too. Jackie Young, for example, has been pretty effective when you look at her production on a per-minute basis, but it's also hard to judge sometimes because in these types of games, you never really know how much energy certain players are putting in when the team is already winning comfortably. Another interesting stat to look at is true shooting percentage, and Clark is actually leading the team there as well. She's sitting around 80% true shooting, which is extremely efficient. Part of the reason that number is so high is because of how well she's finishing inside the arc. Clark is currently shooting 100% from 2-point range, which is honestly kind of wild when you think about it. Every time she's taken a shot inside the 3-point line, it has gone in. She's also shooting about 45% from three, which is another strong number considering the volume of shots she takes. Now, when it comes to rebounds, Clark is near the bottom of the roster, which isn't surprising, since that's not really her role. But she's still ahead of a couple of players in that category, including Kalia Copper. There are also a few other categories where Clark leads that fans sometimes criticize, one of them being turnovers per game. She does currently lead the team in turnovers, but there's an important context to that. Clark also has a well above 2-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio, which is generally considered a very solid benchmark for playmakers. And honestly, the assist-to-turnover ratio debate can sometimes be misleading. What really matters is the number of scoring opportunities a player creates, not just whether every pass results in an official assist. A player can make the perfect pass, but if the teammate misses the shot, it doesn't show up as an assist. That's why evaluating playmakers purely by the assist-to-turnover ratio doesn't always tell the full story. Still, another interesting note is minutes played. Clark is actually leading Team USA in minutes per game, although it's very close. She's basically tied with Paige Bueckers and Kelsey Plum, with only a few seconds separating them. What's also interesting is that Bueckers is actually taking more shots per game than Clark, despite playing slightly fewer minutes. So when you step back and look at everything, the scoring, the assists, the efficiency numbers, it's pretty clear that Clark has been one of the central pieces of Team USA's performance so far. And whether you love the stats or think some of them are overrated, the numbers do tell an interesting story about how this team is functioning right now and which players are driving the success. Tell me what you think. Don't forget like and subscribe.
Give me your first impression of the game.
I thought it was good. I thought we started off a little slow. I thought our second unit came in. It was really good. And then I thought overall in the second half we were pretty good.
Returning back since July, how's your body feeling? You got a lot of rhythm.
Feel good. Obviously, 5 games in 7 days is a true test and see where my body's at. But so far, I feel really good.
Playing at a national level, although first time, how has it been so far with the fans here in Puerto Rico?
It's been great. I thought our game, especially versus Puerto Rico at 8 p.m., was a really fun one for us. The fans have been great. Fans that have come from America have been awesome. So anytime you get to put this jersey on, I think it's a really fun thing. You take a lot of pride in it, and it's a really big honor.
Last game on Wednesday against Spain. What are the expectations for now?
Yeah, I mean, I expect it to probably be our hardest game since we've been here. They're obviously a very good team, so I feel like getting off to a good start. We kind of struggled in that area a couple games, and we kind of did today. So I think getting off to a really good start versus them will be a big key for us. But have a day in between to prep, so we'll be ready.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you.